Hi, it's Bruce Rouse here to talk about what commercial and industrial energy auditors can learn from home energy auditors. Um, so I just want to give you a bit of a background as to my experience. My experience is mostly in commercial and industrial. However, way back when I started, I did do some residential assessments, and I also actually became an assessor here in Australia for energy ratings for new homes. So this basically involved evaluating the plans for new homes and using some software to, I guess, model the expected performance of the home, energy usage of the home, particularly for heating and cooling the home. Um, Additionally, I guess because I've been in this space a long time, I've also done some, I guess, detailed studies of very low energy use homes um, and really written published articles about this. So I have some experience with home energy audits, but on the other hand, I'm not as it's not been my career. It's been more commercial industrial. But however, with this home energy audit experience that I do have, I guess there's some conclusions that I've drawn about why and about what commercial and industrial energy auditors can learn from home energy auditors. Now, normally you'd be kind of thinking it's what home energy auditors can learn from commercial industrial because aren't they bigger, more complex, whatever commercial industrial facilities? Yes, that's true. However, there's some quite basic things that may be skipped by commercial industrial energy auditors that are actually really fundamental. So let's start with the first one, which I see as customer engagement. So if you're dealing with a householder directly, one-on-one, Um, obviously, it's really important that you establish a good rapport with that person, um, and are able to build a relationship of trust where they're going to trust your advice, and hopefully move forward and implement some of your recommendations that you've made. Um, and that it's very personal when it's home. Like it's only just the home owner, maybe the spouse, and yourself. Well, the kids might pop into maybe with their ideas, but it's a very personal engagement. Whereas when you get to a industrial commercial energy audit, it's not so commercial, it's not so personal. It's more kind of a corporate relationship, and and as a consequence, particularly if you're technically focused, you may not think that relationship is that important, and it's your advice that's the most important thing. Your ability to advise them technically. It doesn't really matter if you have a good relationship with them or not. Well, that's actually not true. So in any kind of endeavor, if you're trying to persuade someone to do one, and basically an energy audit is an attempt to persuade someone to invest in energy efficiency. Um, um, it's important. So I think this is something that um, commercial and industrial energy auditors can learn from home energy auditors. And if you're in the C&I space and perhaps want to experience that for yourself, maybe you go and try and do a home energy audit for some of your friends or something like that, and or friends of their friends, so they're kind of like you don't actually know the person, um, and hopefully you'll kind of get it then that this personal relationship is very important. Then that leads on to the next one, which is kind of education. Um, Often, when you're dealing with a corporate or industrial client, and you're dealing, say, with a facility manager or a production manager, you kind of assume that they know what you're talking about. Um, and so you may not spend too much time explaining things. However, whereas with a home, you know, when you're dealing with someone from a home, you might want to explain to them a bit about, um, if they've got looking at a heat pump, you might want to explain how a heat pump works and, how the ambient temperature is important for the performance of the heat pump. And you don't want ice forming on the condenser outside. Well, in the actual fact, it's operating as the evaporator. But when it's in the heat pump mode, it's a reverse cycle unit. So you need to kind of talk through this and explain this, and by explaining it um, and educating the client, you're helping them, I think, take some responsibility for the decisions they make about what to implement. Um, one of the issues with CNI, and I've certainly seen this, is you get a very technical energy audit report, which it's assumed that the person reading the report understands, but that may not be the case. For example, let's look at a facility manager who's managing, a portfolio of buildings, or say two or three buildings, and they've got to manage and they're rushing between the buildings. They may not necessarily come from, say, for example, from an air conditioning background. And if you're writing a lot about the air conditioning and assuming they know that, well, perhaps they don't, they may have picked up bits here and there, but they may not have that detailed technical knowledge. And some of your measures may be quite complex and you perhaps need to spend more time educating them. So that's the second one. The third one is, again, building on that education role, is thinking about the implementation of your measures. And with a home energy audit, you kind of realize that the homeowner is not probably going to go out and then contract some engineer to design the upgrade for them. Um, you've got to kind of step them through what they have to do in terms of the upgrade. So, for example, if you're saying, well, I think you should replace your lighting, you might end up with quite a detailed discussion about light color and the ambience they want to create in the house. And then you might be kind of having a very practical discussion about what sort of LED lights might suit that if they're replacing, say, an existing fluorescent or halogen light. Now, I know that example's a bit dated. Many houses are now LED, but it's about stepping through how to actually implement my advice. You're probably more likely to do that with a home energy audit than you are with commercial and industrial, where maybe your time's more limited, you've got a lot to cover, um, and so you're not actually making the implementation that practical. Whereas if you want people to really move forward with your advice, and basically a successful energy audit is one that's where the advice is implemented. If no action is taken on the energy audit advice, well, then it's been a waste of time. So I think that commercial industrial energy auditors can perhaps learn from home energy auditors in that, because they've got this stronger relationship with the client as a home energy auditor, they're feeling more responsible to make it easy for the homeowner or home occupant to implement the advice that's provided by making the implementation advice more practical. Now I want to get into a big one, which I feel many commercial and industrial energy auditors, including myself, haven't addressed very well. And this is the building envelope. Um, so heating and cooling is a major source of energy use in both homes and in commercial buildings. Um, so I'm thinking here more commercial rather than industrial. Um, Heating and cooling is a large energy user. And the first thing we need to do is, I've developed a thing called the energy efficiency hierarchy. And the second thing on that hierarchy is reduce the need for the service. So if the service is heating and cooling, you need to reduce the need for heating and cooling. And how do you do that? Well, you look at how unwanted heat or cold gets into the building. And that can be through air movement. So then you're looking at, reducing or restricting air movement. It can be through induction of heat. And that's when there's no bulk insulation to reduce the transfer of heat, or it's only simple single glazing. And then we look at the radiant heat loss or gain, which I think is often actually not well understood by commercial and industrial energy auditors. Um, and it's about managing that radiant heat loss or gain through radiant barriers and through windows also that effectively manage radiant heat through things like low E coatings or reflective films. So reducing the need to heat or cool is really important. It's the largest energy user, but often commercial and industrial energy auditors don't do this. Whereas, we have the concept called passive house. Passive house, you may have heard that. This is a very highly efficient house, which is actually passive in terms of its needing for heating and cooling. In theory, it doesn't need any active heating or cooling. Um, have you heard of passive office? I don't know what the passive house, HAUS is a German word. I don't know what the word for office is in German, but we've not heard of passive office, have we? We don't have that kind of concept yet, because commercial isn't really steeped yet in this concept of the building envelope. Now, building envelope upgrades can be very expensive, perhaps, and the cost benefit may not necessarily be that good. Um, but perhaps one of the reasons it's not that good is because we haven't put much attention to it, so we don't have a volume market, so the prices haven't dropped. If we look at solar PV, look at how much the solar prices have plummeted over the last 15 odd years. Um, Whereas insulation, things like that, the installation costs, often it's installation costs, but have we seen much innovation? Perhaps not. And maybe that's because we don't have enough focus in the commercial industrial space on building envelope improvements to reduce unwanted heat transfer. Now, another thing that perhaps this one's a little bit maybe controversial because I'm a big fan of the 80-20 rule. The 80-20 rule says you focus on the big issue, big ticket items that give you the biggest benefit. But if you're really, really chasing a lot of savings, you also have to look at the small items. And implementing lots of small measures adds up. And so when you're assessing a home for energy savings, basically you end up looking at everything because a home's not that complicated. You look at the you look at the heating and cooling of the building, you look at the domestic hot water, um, you look at the lighting, and you look at all the plug loads, everything that's plugged into a wall outlet, you're going to look at refrigeration, um, you look at all the appliances, washing machine, dryer, etc. You look at everything. Yeah. And maybe you'll have some measures focusing all those areas to save energy. Um, and then that can all add up to some quite significant savings. Um, Whereas commercial industrial, maybe sometimes we just focus too much, and when and this is treading a fine line because you've got a limited budget. But I just want to emphasize that sometimes small things can add up and a very comprehensive assessment. And again, with experience, I know from experience, the more you do and the more you think about how you structure your work as an energy auditor, the better you get and the faster it is to identify many measures. These things can add up. So, I feel a good CNI energy audit might have 15 or 20 quantified energy savings recommendations. That's a lot. Um, Whereas sometimes you might only see 4 or 5 or 6, um, because some of these small things have been missed out. But the small things often may have a really good payback and can often give that concept of a quick win. You implement something, you get a quick win, and that then gives people motivation to go and implement the harder stuff. Okay, then the last one is behavior change matters. So, when you're talking to a homeowner, behavior change is certainly going to come up when you're talking about energy savings measures. You'll be asking, when does this thing go? When do you turn this on? When do you turn that off? How long a shower do you have? Um, and you'll be asking questions about behavior. Yeah. And you might be suggesting some behavior changes. For example, I suggest that, in addition to putting flow restrictors on your taps and basins, and in your shower, let's talk about the idea of reducing your shower length. Yeah, maybe having a timer or something in the shower, just to influence that behavior change, or you discuss set points and influencing those set points. And again, some commercial industrial energy orders might just write off behavior change, and the argument being that behavior change may not be permanent. Um, that people do it at first and then they forget, they lapse back to their old habits. Fair enough. Yeah, I kind of agree with that the behavior change may not necessarily be permanent, but then it can help open up people to ideas and of things that I'm a fan of, like a one-shot timer is something where you, to start something, you have to press a button or do something, but then it goes off automatically after a certain time period. That's called a run out timer or a one-shot timer. um, and so you can't forget about it, you're forced to turn it on and then it goes off automatically. Um, so, but behavior change can get the conversation about behavior change that you do have in a residential home. I think it's important to have in a business context, and that people can agree. Yeah, it's important. Yeah, okay, it's important that we improve the light switch off practices. And you say, well, why don't you try that for a while, and then we'll review it in a couple of months. Um, and if that doesn't work, then we can move to a more expensive option, which might be occupancy sensors. But that's kind of initiate that conversation. So to wrap it up, the things I've suggested that C&I energy auditors can learn from home energy auditors is customer engagement, education, making implementation practical, look at the building envelope, small things add up, and behavior change matters. Hope that that was useful. Thanks.